all that surrounding me, and rest assured, 'cause I'm not here alone. I'm not moved, 'cause there's one thing I know. Oh, through it all.
Hello everyone, so welcome once again to today's review on the book titled The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So basically today we are going to be seeing this book together. This week we saw from chapter 1 to 3, 4 I guess. See it together till chapter 11. Just a very brief review, and I'm going to be sharing the PowerPoint slide I had to just come up with for this. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So like I said, basically the writer has his own worldview, or what I would say he believes is more like the best thing. It's his worldview. It's necessarily not what everyone should follow. It's his perspective, or I would say it's the perception he has. Necessarily not a general one. He spoke a lot about luck. So last time we saw chapter 1 to 3. In chapter 4 it talks about the law of compounding. It talks about the law of compounding. That means gathering things together. The real secret behind Warren Buffett, for instance, he just spoke about the fact that he already started investing from when he was 10, right? But an average youth sometimes might not be aware of that. So he just talked about that, gathering things over time. Of course, in the slide I state, Buffett started investing at age 10 and never stopped. If he had started at 30, like most people today, he would be worth a fraction of what he is today, maybe divide by 10 or whatsoever. So the key idea is that compounding is not flashy. Sometimes it might not make sense, adding those things little by little. It's slow, boring, and the most powerful force in wealth creation. It's actually powerful. So the longer you stay in the game, it's just spoke about this in that chapter. Basically, the longer you stay, the more advantageous it is to you. Do not look for money in a rush or just quickly. So that kind of mindset might not generate wealth, where you just want it fast, right? So he talked about also getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. They are two different things. Getting money and keeping money are completely different. Gave several scenarios and stories about people that just got money in a rush and still lost it. There's a skill in keeping money. Getting rich requires boldness, of course, risk taking and optimism. That is not being pessimistic. Staying rich requires humility, fear, and paranoia about losing what you have. So basically he just gave the difference. Of course, someone can just be optimistic and take risk and just get a lot of money, then over time he will lose it. During the introduction in this book, we talked about the fact that he said getting money or building wealth is more of a character thing. So staying wealthy is a character thing. You have to be humble a lot. The key ideas here is it talks about survivor first, gave stories about that. It talks about the ability to stay in the game, of course, the game of money, especially when things go wrong, and is more valuable than any single big win. So it's not just about just one big win, one startup, one fund, and that's all. No, it's the ability to stay in the game. He talked about that here in this chapter. Then in chapter 6 he talks about the tales you win. I think chapter 6 and 7 were just very short. He said a few decisions will account for almost everything in your life. He talks about I think he gave some stories here about Disney, how they come up and all of that. It was through consistency over time. So at first they were not there, they were definitely not seeing results. So of course I read in this slide, in venture capital most investment fail, of course, but a handful, that's the tail event, generate almost all the return. So in Disney he talks about the fact that before they had their big win, which is Beauty and the Beast, they already have hundreds of cartoons they already published and they were already spending on. But when Beauty and the Beast blew, it already gave them their returns. It gave them more of the win that they were anticipating and they were looking for. So the key idea is you can be wrong a lot and still win, as long as your wins are big enough sometimes. So you can have like 5 startups, 5 ideas, 10 ideas, and sometimes 9 might fail, but as long as one will be a big win, then it will cover for the losses for the rest. That's what they talked about in that particular chapter. Then in chapter 7, freedom, the highest dividend money pays is the ability to control your time. Definitely, this is the highest dividend, the highest profits, the highest win you can say you have when you get the money is actually freedom, right? People usually think they want luxury cars, watches, houses, and the rest of them, like he wrote here. But what they actually want is freedom to wake up and do whatever they want. Money is still speaking. The key idea in this particular chapter is that money's greatest value is autonomy, the ability to still control yourself without being restricted, right? If your financial goal doesn't include freedom of your time, you are working towards someone else's dream. We spoke about that in this chapter. In chapter 8, man is the car paradox, right? Nobody's thinking about you as much as you think they are. So I think in this scenario he gave about the fact that he just explained the fact that some persons go about buying cars, doing some luxurious things and pushing it online just for people to think about them or to feel that they are rich. But the truth is, as he said, people actually do not think about you the way they think they are. They all have their life going, they have what they are doing, they are pushing themselves, right? Spending to impress others is a losing game. Like he said, the people you want to impress are too busy thinking about themselves. He talked about that in this chapter. You focus on yourself and you ignore people. Of course, he said this will make you also spend wisely, right? You are not spending because you want people to see that you are rich, right? Of course, that ideology might not be similar to the ideology of fake it till you make it. I think he even talked about that in one of the chapters. In the ideology of fake it till you make it, sometimes before you get the customers you want or you want the patronage that you are looking for, you have to fake some things. So that's why I said some of his ideology might not really align with some person's ideology. Then in chapter 9, he talked about wealth. Wealth is what you don't see. It's really not about money, alright? Real wealth is the money not spent, asset and options you haven't converted to lifestyle. So the person driving a flashy car might be broke, he might be paying mortgage, he might even use a loan. I think he gave an example of a guy he saw driving a Ferrari. Then after some months, the guy went back to driving a regular car. When he asked him, he said they took it back from him because he was not able to pay his loan. So wealth is what you don't see actually. So you do not just judge by seeing people and you just say, oh, this person is wealthy or this person is not, because you saw him wearing a flashy dress, driving a flashy car or whatsoever. He spoke about that extensively in this chapter 9. So the person in one cloth might have millions quietly invested. Wealth is hidden by definition. Once you spend it, it becomes some. So like I said, you necessarily do not have to agree with everything you see. Some persons believe in packaging. They believe people see wealth. You dress well, you put on your tie and all of that. That's his ideology. So the key idea in the particular chapter is that you should stop confusing visible spending with wealth. You see people visibly spending money extravagantly, right? True wealth is invisible. That is his ideology. Then in chapter 10, he talks about the fact that you should save money. Some persons do not believe in it. Of course, me, I personally do not believe saving money will make you wealthy. Of course, it can make you save some time to bring out some money to invest later and all of that. But he says saving rates matters more than investment returns, because investment is actually risky. It makes some sense there, right? But not 100%. He said you can't always control market returns, but you can always control how much you save. A high saving rate gives you options, right? Security and the ability to wait for the right opportunities when you save, right? So the key idea here is that you don't need a specific reason to save. You should just save for its own sake. You don't have to wait for something because I want to buy a car, I'm saving. No, you just have to save. It has to be a lifestyle. It has to be flexible, of course, and it's one of the most powerful financial moves you can make. Not just putting all your money in investment, because some investment will not yield fruit. Then in chapter 11, which is the last chapter we'll be reviewing today, he talks about reasonable greater than rational. Of course, this part is spoke about the fact that being perfectly rational with money is impossible, being reasonable is achievable. Most of the thing this guy said in most of his reviews, in most of his books, right, the ideology kind of passed is the fact that you can't really predict things. All right, some things comes through luck. Of course, even the risk you are taking, you can't also predict it. That was the ideology was always actually passing through in this book. So sometimes he talks about the fact that you should be on the safer side. A purely rational investor would never hold cash, like he said, it underperforms. But a reasonable investment investor holds some cash to sleep at night and stay in the game during the downturn. I believe that during the Great Impression, some persons that held some cash were able to survive during that, and some persons that were investing, that was crazily risky, right? That kind of ideology. So the key idea here is to aim to be reasonable, not perfect, right? A strategy you can actually stick to beats a theoretical optimal one you abandon at the first sign of trouble. So he just talked about that you should just be reasonable instead of just being rational. Sometimes being reasonable to keep cash is going to help you. Being reasonable to keep cash to control your money is going to help you. So that will be all for today. Tomorrow we are going to see the next chapter, hopefully chapter 12 to the 20th chapter, which will be the last. So there's so much to learn. Just a quick one. The book basically talks about his ideology, Morgan Husserl's ideology about money, talks about risk a lot, talks about luck majorly, talks about saving and all of that, talks about the fact that you cannot sometimes judge from what you see. Like I said, some of his ideology, some persons might not fully agree with it, but the truth is that I'm sure towards the end of this book, he talks about the fact that not everyone will necessarily agree with whatsoever he says, but definitely at some point would see the sense. He talks about what, for instance, what he talks about in saving kind of makes some sense, because it's better to be safe sometimes than to just put everything in risky investments, no matter how you think it. If you invest in 100 items or whatsoever, sometimes 90 might even fail. Of course, he talks about the big win that might be beneficiary, but definitely he is also now talking about saving. So in the next chapters, we'll see his point of view and what he wants to see. You can always pick up this book to read it, but basically this review is just going to give you a summary of what the authors are trying to discuss in their book. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.